Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 5th, 2019. Still checking, right? It's still December. Yes, obviously, but 2019. I guess time to start thinking about, in about a month, we'll start forgetting that it's 2020 and say it's 2019. We might even write it on our checks if we wrote any checks anymore. I don't think that's actually a huge problem. It's one of those cliches that will go away after time. I guess the Zoomer generation will be laughing at us Xers and older who say things like, I'm still writing 2019 on my paper documents, whatever those may be. All right, ready to roll out another show? Too bad, because it's happening anyway. Daily Coast Radio is live now. We are reminded all the way from Portland, Maine. Thanks, Bill. In response to yesterday's controversy, he says, I, David Waldman, Kagro X, will do some research and discover that Trump, in fact, cannot make Barron a baron. But apparently he can make him the Archduke of Prussia, and why not? I think that's probably something you ought to think about. Keep all the possibilities open. I like to have all the options on the table if I can. Baron. I'm just going to say it a couple of times because it apparently triggers somebody. I'm not exactly sure who. One of the most disingenuous displays I've seen in a long time. Of course, you know all about it. You would have heard this by now. I call it Smoky Eye Gate 2. It's pretty much exactly the same sort of outrage. You remember that one? Michelle Wolf, the comedian who made a joke at the White House Correspondents' Dinner saying that, it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the time, liked to, burn the truth and use the ashes for a perfect smoky eye treatment, eyeshadow, the application. I don't remember what the joke was. The joke was funny. My retelling of it, not so much. I couldn't remember it. Anyways, so yeah, they all got outraged and remember, it's a huge insult to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. It's about her looks, etc. And now only tangentially at best. Same thing happening here. Same principle. And press fell for it again the same way, which is amazing. Because originally I thought, it was because it happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner that they were so sensitive about that counter charge and they were backing off on it. Maybe it's just something that the press falls for all the time because the press went all in for this one. An unforced error was the way they described it. It's not an error, it wasn't unforced, and it wasn't even an insult, and I don't know. So here we are today, dealing with that. Of course, that's not the only thing we're dealing with. I had a feeling it would go this way, and I've seen the coverage that hints at the same thing, but I just saw, I think Eric Boehlert put it in a succinct little tweet, I guess, with his example from the New York Times, which was that, there were yesterday's hearings to cover, one hearing, and the Judiciary Committee. I did get a chance to take a peek for a short while at what was going on. You know what actually happened. They had 4 legal scholars in to testify to give their opinion on whether, and it was a pretty solid opinion in most cases, on whether or not that we were looking at impeachable offenses here and what is the nature of impeachment, that sort of thing. It was not fact witnesses. Another disingenuous attack that the Republicans spent all day on. Well, how many of you know the contents of the, or are experts in the contents of the report produced by the Intelligence Committee? Most people who testified had actually read through it, whatever was available anyway. But the report was brand new. No one had read it, of course. But that wasn't why they were there. But they were able to get their TV moment. The Republicans thought Matt Gaetz scored a huge point in saying, none of you are fact witnesses, right? Raise your hand if you know, if you are able to converse intelligently about the contents of the Intelligence Committee report. Who would care about that? Sondland can't. The whistleblower can't. But they said that they've been crying for weeks that they haven't heard from the whistleblower. If we had brought the whistleblower, Would they have asked that question? Probably, because they thought it would produce that moment. I'm asking you if you know about something important. That's not why you're here. So the answer is no. So therefore, aha. So he got a lot of mileage among the wingnuts out of this one. Eric Boehlert was, of course, complaining about the New York Times coverage of the situation, pointing out that, of course, there were, gotta get to the phone here, that there were 4 legal scholars testifying yesterday, one of whom, Jonathan Turley, was there actually at the invitation of the Republicans to give a contrasting view. And it wasn't even all that positive, honestly, for the Republicans in this situation. He basically said, well, they ended up saying if you could show evidence that showed a quid pro quo, then you might have something here. And, of course, everybody said, that's funny because we actually have all that evidence. And he hemmed and hawed for a little while. But even he came around to the conclusion, essentially, that, yeah, you're dealing with impeachable crimes here. I just would like to see more of a record developed of it. But Eric's quite rightful complaint is 4 legal scholars testified yesterday. 3 of them said Trump obviously engaged in impeachable behavior. 1, invited by the Republicans, said, I'm not certain you proved it as well as I'd like to see it proved. So today, of course, the New York Times, A1, above the fold, big article focusing only on Turley and his sort of kind of almost opinion that maybe you might not necessarily want to impeach somebody for with this level of evidence that he had committed foul and impeachable crimes. And, I think we all knew that was going to happen, just as we knew they were going to pick up on the Barron thing once that one was floated too. So not a great day for the press, but there are so few of them anyway. Greg Dworkin is here, and he's also read some of the press's output and probably has something to add to this. Good morning, Greg.
I have, and I have a different impression. Actually, I thought it came over fairly well.
Okay.
Yeah, the New York Times is the New York Times, and they have the dumb headline and story, but also cover the rest of it. And interestingly, the New York Times has the one person who's allowed to do this, which is James Poniewozik. And I say that because he is an actual theater critic.
Okay. All right, yes.
So he writes Critic's Notebook. The impeachment show fleshes out its backstory. The congressional saga returned to TV, shifting modes from foreign intrigue thriller to constitutional documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I watched most of the morning.
You did?
I always try to watch
he did.
the 45-minute parts where counsel asks questions, because that's usually really interesting.
Yes.
And then I tune in and out of the 5-minute BS sessions later, which is to say that the congressional people get to ask their 5 minutes of speech, and then at the end, I have a question, I don't want you to answer, shut up, go away.
Right.
And it was, I thought it was just, this was Schoolhouse Rock. This was just a fascinating discussion of what was intended and what was meant. And the 3 Democratic witnesses did a wonderful job explaining what bribery meant at the time the Constitution was written.
Okay. I mean,
for those
largely the same,
like Turley who complain that how can you impeach somebody when an actual crime hasn't been committed?
Easy, but go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 3 Democratic constitutional scholars said, let's make the complicated simple.
Wow.
The Constitution came first.
Yes.
You didn't have a legal code to go by when the Constitution was written because the Constitution came first. So the idea that the constitutional bribery would be dependent upon whatever legal code you have is silly because that's backwards.
Mm.
Bribery's in the Constitution because the Constitution is what sets the laws. And no, it didn't refer to a specific statute because there weren't any. In fact, there weren't any bribery statutes for another 50 years.
Were there no states? I'm curious whether there was no state.
They started doing it with, the guys that were responsible for trade, and then they got the judges, and there was a progression. But the point is, at the time the Constitution was written, that precedes all of that. So they're going to have their own idea of what bribery was, and they explained what it was. And Turley disagreed, but the interesting part, and this is an article by Joshua Geltzer, the executive director of the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like a
That.
raging liberal to me.
Well,
In fact, it was recommended by Jonathan Adler, the conservatarian, libertarian legal analyst. The legal debate about impeachment is over, he writes. The expert witness called by Republicans agreed that the quid pro quo, if proven, would be an impeachable act. That's it, right there. That's the whole ball game.
See?
So there's really nothing else to whatever Turley's objections were, which are basically contrarian, or as Armando likes to point out, he'll take whatever position gets him in front of the camera, because if he agrees with everybody else's position, nobody wants to talk to him.
No reason to, anyway.
No reason to. But his wasn't especially well-reasoned. He had an opinion. I think it's going too slow. I think they didn't do it right. He's like Chuck Todd, except with a legal degree. I think they should have done it this way. I don't like the way they did it that way. Nobody is coming here to testify with firsthand information. Well, that's because he specifically referred to subpoenas, and it turns out there were 10 subpoenas that the White House is stonewalling.
Ah, yes.
Now, to be generous to Turley, perhaps what he meant was that he thinks that the legal judicial process should play out first, and that's why he thinks it's going too fast. In other words, acknowledging, yes, there are subpoenas, yes, the White House is stonewalling. It's not like the Democrats didn't try to go through the correct procedure, but they should let that play out entirely before we go anywhere with this, even though it's going to take 2 years.
Ah, well, that's one of the problems. But okay.
That is one of the problems. However, the basis of why Trump is being impeached and impeached now and impeached over this, the quid pro quo, he acknowledges, yeah, that's a big deal. And as a matter of fact, he even went further and got cut off by the White House counsel when he started to do this, is he wasn't really happy with that perfect phone call. It wasn't perfect. And he started to explain why it wasn't perfect, and they shut him up and moved on to something else. It was really kind of amusing. But the point is that all four scholars agree that, first of all, impeachment, is in the Constitution.
It is. I saw it.
It is the rule that the House decides how it's going to proceed, not Turley or anybody else, certainly not the president.
True.
And that bribery is a big deal. Now, you can argue about whether it's been proven. Oh, that's fine. That's the purpose of the trial in the Senate. But the idea that it should be done really wasn't under dispute, even by Turley.
Aha. Well, I don't know what to tell you. There was always going to be an imbalance in focus. Probably.
Well, sure, and you could see that.
Unusual.
And it was kind of amusing. You had these four scholars.
Yes.
3 of whom were picked by the Democrats, 1 by the Republicans. The Democratic counsel basically only asked the Democratic witnesses questions. He had one for Turley. Professor Turley, did you say And Turley said, yes, but, and the counsel said, that's not what I asked. Did you say that? Yeah. Yes, I did. Okay, fine. And then he went and he spent the other 44 minutes talking to the other 3. The Republican counsel only talked to Turley. I don't know if he had a single question for any of the other 3. I can't remember, but it was like 99.9%. What does Turley think?
All right.
And again, all opinion from Turley has got nothing to do with whether or not impeachment is appropriate. He agrees it is. Or whether or not the House has the power to do it. He agrees. And whether or not a quid pro quo was so bad that you should impeach somebody. He agrees with all of that. His main objection is that the Democrats haven't gone through the legal proceedings of trying to enforce a subpoena in the courts, and the courts haven't answered yet, and therefore it's all premature. And that's it. That is not much of a defense. So you can cover it any way you want to. That's why looking at how the theater critic is doing it is at least as valid as anybody else, because there was really no disagreement there.
Okay.
So what Ponowozik says is the Republican minority, meanwhile, seem to want to cast the proceedings as so dull that the viewing audience would tune out. It's the only show on TV, half of whose cast is praying for its cancellation. Mm-hmm. Representative Ben Klein of Virginia imagined a family watching the hearing at home and mistaking it for a rerun. And Mr. Collins, in his opening remarks, he did exactly what we said he was going to do, object to everything until Nadler shut him down on all of the points of order and privilege motions and, a number of them. He said, no, you're not recognized. And Mr. Collins, in his opening remarks, said that America will see why most people don't go to law school. Mm-hmm. which was really offensive, but not as offensive as Louis Gohmert, because Louis Gohmert actually singled out in a press conference afterwards and said, so all I've got to say is if you love America, mamas don't let your babies grow up to go to Harvard or Stanford Law School.
Yes.
So he singled out those particular ones.
That's nice of him to do. By the way,
I think he was talking
fans
about
don't have a lot
Elise
to worry
Stefanik, who
about
went to
there.
Harvard, but who knows?
I guess
Anyway,
so.
So Collins' objection was hard to follow because, like Doug Collins always does, the ranking member, he speaks so fast you can't really understand what he's saying.
Yeah, I think I
So
bought a
it's
car.
not a particularly effective
accidentally.
defense on the part of the Republicans.
Apparently not there. And although I watched a little bit of the 5-minute sessions, it was, of course, mostly a disgrace.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I didn't see very many points scored there. I thought.
Plenty of people had tuned out. As Poniwose puts it, the morning TV audience did go to law school, however, for at least a few hours. The broadcast networks cut away early in the afternoon on the East Coast, and this may not have pleased those viewers or commentators who measure their congressional hearings by bombshell, but for anybody interested in a deep dive TV lesson on the roots and theory of impeachment, class was in session. You just had to dodge the occasional spitball. And that's about how it came across. It was a sober, as a judge, legal discussion in plain English about what the Constitution says. It was so needed. And people who 10 minutes into it, like James Bresnahan from Politico, who said, I'm bored. Well, screw you. It's not for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They've been dealing with it for a long time. It's the rest of the country has to kind of tune in and catch up. That is pretty interesting, that dichotomy there. And it is, as you said, I thought of Sarah Palin, who used to say things were so needed in this great country of ours. And I wonder if she agrees this time, because you're using her phrase.
Let me give you some other examples. Okay, this is from Huffington Post. Fox News legal analyst. This is Andrew Napolitano.
Oh, yeah. He's getting fired. Go on.
I certainly would vote to impeach Donald Trump. Andrew Napolitano acknowledged that if he were in the House, he'd vote to impeach the president.
Andrew Napolitano in the House, ladies and gentlemen.
Right, the easiest one, because this existed in Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, is obstruction of Congress, he said.
Yes.
By directing his subordinates to refuse to comply with lawfully issued subpoenas, in other words, slowing things down the way that Turley doesn't like, whether it's for testimony or for documents, that's an impeachable offense. I don't know if anybody really pressed Turley on that. But the fact of the matter is, the reason that it would go so slow is because they're stonewalling. That in and of itself is an impeachable offense. Now, there's two obstruction articles that may come out of this. One is obstruction of justice, which is what happened when you fire Comey. The other is obstruction of Congress, which is what happens when you refuse to comply with lawfully issued subpoenas.
Yes.
So those might be separate things to debate, and that's what judiciary will wind up debating. And by the way, just two other things to throw in there just to make sure I remember to say them before I forget.
Okay, throw.
Number one, they're also talking about obstruction of justice, meaning we're going to pull in some of the Mueller stuff. No, we haven't forgotten about that. And secondly, Nancy Pelosi is making a statement about all of this just as we are speaking. She was supposed to start at 9 o'clock, although those things are somewhat delayed. So she's going to play out exactly what's going on here. Now, Bill Hemmer said to Napolitano, if you're in the House, would you vote for impeachment? I certainly would. Now, you certainly would on the count of obstruction. That's clear.
Yes.
Okay. And Napolitano said the hearing wouldn't have done much to change public perception, but he warned letting Trump be Trump is not good enough under the Constitution. We don't lower the bar because the president has unorthodox ways. The bar is intentionally broad and even ambiguous as to what high crimes and misdemeanors are. We learned today, and this is Napolitano speaking, that the Democrats apparently intend to include in there things we didn't know they were going to include, like bribery, obstruction of justice allegations, which were made by Bob Mueller long before the Ukraine case came to the public's attention. So he's telling the Fox News audience this. They're hearing it. How they process it and what they do with it, I don't know. But the whole idea is to get the information out there. And I am, again, I'm a contrarian on this. I don't believe in looking at snap polls and saying, 2 days later, this is what the public thinks. This is a complicated situation, and you have to let it seep in. And what you may wind up doing is convincing the public, for example, okay, he did it. It's bad. I don't think it's necessarily impeachable because, after all, I'm pretty happy with the economy. then if the economy tanks, you have this in the background saying, okay, I remember that stuff that was bad? It's still bad. And the economy isn't so good either. I don't know. I mean, that's how that stuff works, and that's how people make up their minds in terms of who to vote for.
Yes.
So I don't think that it's useless or that if you don't see the polls move, it means anything. What we were looking for was what the White House claimed was going to happen. There was going to be this huge backlash against the Democrats. That hasn't happened at all. I was just looking at the Trump job approval numbers, and he's at a relatively low 41.6 in the 538 composite in the aggregate there, which is about where he was in March, about 9 months ago.
Okay.
Right? There's nothing that's happened that's improved him. And I would argue, this is in the middle of an impeachment discussion. You'd expect if there's going to be a rally around the president from Republicans, now would be when you would see it. So I'm not buying the argument that, he's only at 41, but, when it gets closer to the election, all the Republicans will come home. If they're not coming home now, why would they come home then?
I don't know. Time will have passed and we'll have forgotten about impeachment because we wrapped it up before Christmas.
And who Trump is, right. I don't think so.
I don't know.
So the other thing, Morning Consult has their monthly tracking numbers out this morning, tracking Trump, the president standing across America. And it's got interesting numbers. I don't necessarily buy that this is the be-all and end-all of everything.
Numbers. Has it got an 8?
For example, he's minus 13 net approval in Minnesota, minus 14 in Wisconsin and in Michigan, minus 13 in Iowa. He's minus 5 in Ohio. Plus 1 Florida, plus 3 Texas. His most populous states, Wyoming at 35 and Alabama at 22. Minus 7 in your Virginia. He's minus 22 in my Connecticut. But these are not necessarily good numbers. He's only plus 7 in South Carolina, for example, and he's minus 1 in North Carolina. These are approval ratings, not who I'm going to vote for. But if your net approval is minus 14 in Wisconsin, it's a big if. I don't necessarily – it's one poll, and I don't necessarily think that that's true because that's not what the other polls say. But if you're at minus 14 in Wisconsin, you're not winning the election. And if you look at the trend over time – it's been worse for Trump over time, not better.
So, is time on his side? Is the question.
Time is not on his side.
Oh, all right.
Example, in April of 2017, he was plus 1 in Wisconsin, and now he's minus 17. Excuse me, minus 13.
Okay. Well, minus is good. 13.
Minus 14. I mean, these are all like cold. If this were the thermometer, this would be cold.
I guess so. Well, how's Trump's track record at reversing trends dramatically?
Well, that hasn't happened.
Oh, never?
I mean, he's the owner of the poll that doesn't move.
Right. So, okay, that's kind of that's something to take away, too. Now, there's time, and things can change, but his track record in changing things over time is terrible. So, what do you make of it? All right.
Exactly. Anyway, I just thought that's all interesting. So, what's happening at the same time?
Still good.
The other big story that came out during the impeachment hearing yesterday is that it turns out the Inspector General and John Dunham, who is appointed by Bill Barr to go talk to other countries and figure out how did this Russia probe start in the first place.
Russia. Yes.
Trump's favorite conspiracy theory deteriorates, writes Aaron Blake, courtesy of 2 men he hailed. President Trump has proclaimed it perhaps the biggest scandal in American history, and he's hailed the 2 men who would allegedly rip the lid off of it, but more and more it's looking like they won't deliver the scandalous finding he was counting on. Trump's played up 2 probes into the origins of the Russia investigation, one by Inspector General Mike Horowitz, the other by U.S. Attorney John Durham. And in both cases, he's built up the men themselves, but Washington Post reports on both investigations now suggest the duo are not endorsing Trump's chief conspiracy theory that the probe of Washington interference in the 2016 presidential election was an unfounded witch hunt.
What do
the Post reports that Durham has told Horowitz he cannot endorse a theory espoused by Trump and other Republicans that the Russia investigation was a setup, a coup, by U.S. intelligence to take Trump down.
Oh, man.
Among Horowitz's questions, whether a Maltese professor, the Maltese Falcon, who interacted with a Trump campaign advisor was actually a U.S. intelligence asset deployed to ensnare the campaign. Horowitz interviewed the intelligence agencies, other people. The answer is no.
All right. Too bad it didn't work out. Still time.
Now, recently, Trump has suggested he's more looking forward to Durham's report, which was ordered directly by his Attorney General, Roy Cohen. So you have a FISA report coming out, which the word is, it's historic. That's what the word is. That's what I hear Trump said.
Oh, yeah. He's always good when he hears what the word is.
Right. Now, a couple caveats here. One is that Durham investigation, unlike Horowitz's, isn't wrapping up. It's possible he could find additional information that he simply doesn't have now. Yeah, it's possible the moon is made out of green cheese. We just don't know yet because you haven't been there. It's circumstantial. It's hearsay. It's not direct evidence. Well, of course, we have been there, but that's not the point. The second variable, because we haven't been like in every single place on the moon. The second variable is Barr, writes Aaron Blake, an early proponent of the idea that the surveillance of former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page was problematic. He's taken a significant personal interest in the outcome of these investigations. Barr's traveled with Durham to secure cooperation from foreign countries and recently expressed disagreement with Horowitz's overrunning conclusion. As I noted at the time, Barr may not be able to do much about an Inspector General's independent report, but he can exercise significant influence over Durham's probe and its aftermath. And if his handling of Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation is any indication, his influence looms large. That's how Aaron Blake finishes the article. So again, one of the interesting things about the House Intelligence Report is that it was a report that came out without Bill Barr mucking with it first.
Yes, that's true.
Really good.
Yeah, and it's good to see that happens every once in a while. And when it does happen, they reach, oddly, the opposite conclusion of what Bill Barr's more favored reports that he gets.
After the break, we'll talk about Joe Biden.
Okay, we'll do that. Interesting that they have decided that the Durham investigation will linger and continue on and isn't close to wrapping up. The opposite.
Well, that's what they want. That's what they wanted from the Ukraine thing. They want the announcement that it's continuing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. And yes, okay, so Greg's still with us. The discussion moving on. I will say, like I was thinking at the end of the break, it is interesting that the Trump team has come to the conclusion that the investigation they want to conduct will continue on. It's nowhere close to wrapping up. It will linger, and maybe it will end up dropping its startling conclusions, I don't know, say very close, perhaps even to the election.
Within 10 days of the election.
And whereas the Democrats have decided that they want to wrap this thing up sooner rather than later. So there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not that's the way to approach it or not. And I suppose if you were a skeptic,
let's ask Jonathan Turley. He has opinions about speed.
Well, he says actually continue on, right? And we don't agree with him with most other things. And I guess the fact that Trump has come to the conclusion that his thing should drag out. You could take some solace in finding out. I didn't necessarily think that they should wrap this up right away, but look at who is for dragging things out. Maybe we're right here. I don't know. You could make that argument. You'll have to make it on your own time, but it's out there. You have more, though, and as I recall, the direction we were going was the no malarkey direction was next.
Yeah, well, I was, because Joe Biden came out with a really interesting ad that a lot of people are talking about for two separate reasons. This is Joe Biden's Twitter feed. He says, the world is laughing at President Trump as he presents snippets of the ad. They see him for what he really is, dangerously incompetent and incapable of world leadership. We can't give him 4 more years as commander-in-chief. Now, he has different video clips of people ridiculing Trump, laughing at him. He has Trump confused, going to shake people's hands, and they go and they turn to talk to somebody else. And he says the world see Trump for what he is, insincere, ill-informed, corrupt, dangerously incompetent, and incapable, in my view, of world leadership. And if we give Donald Trump 4 more years, we'll have a great deal of difficulty of ever being able to recover America's standing in the world and our capacity to bring nations together. So it's a really, and we need a leader. It's a solid ad. It has clips of Trump being a jerk. And interestingly, it has this voiceover by Joe Biden, which is read, or at least blended in, as a stable single sentence. You know, something Biden doesn't really do well in debates. We were talking about the other day. He's got this stutter. He's got this speech style, whatever you think of him. Everybody, you know, who's like 30 years old looks at him and says, what is wrong with that guy? Why can't he talk like a human being? So in this voiceover, he sounds human. And so he's got those 2 things going for him in the ad, just looking at it as a, you know, ad critic, as a theater critic, if you will. But the thing that makes it most powerful, I mean, the plus part is Biden speaking coherently, but the thing that really makes it powerful is it hits Trump where it hurts. Not only is he incompetent, but people laugh at him behind his back. He hates that.
That's true. He does.
I mean, there were articles about how he hated it. Paul Waldman wrote that article we talked about yesterday, 2 years ago, about how he hates it when people laugh at him.
Yes.
And Biden's hitting him.
Yeah, well, good. That's certainly a good weak spot. We saw this picture earlier this morning. I haven't seen it around much, but the picture from the Times of London, I think it was, front page, just a shot of the world leaders laughing. And
Trump leaves early while leaders laugh at Trump. Yeah,
Trump walks
exactly.
away.
That's how it's being covered.
Yeah, well, they nailed that one pretty much. So, okay, we'll take that. And I saw a lot of, it's funny, it was partisans received the Biden ad in various ways. But of course, there were people who are dead set against Biden winning the primaries, who are rolling their eyes somehow.
Most of them are on Twitter, you know, and that's the point where you just like don't pay attention to Twitter.
It made sense. I understood why they were doing it, but the ad, you know, it does. It hits home, and it was quickly produced and quickly turned around and takes advantage of the moment, and that's what you want in a candidate, even if you would say, oh, I would have put the message differently. Well, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But I mean, Biden
Meanwhile, Sam Stein asked a very, very good impeachment question.
Oh, okay. Where's my
if Mitch McConnell validates the impeachment process by holding a trial in the Senate, what's the White House's rationale at that point for withholding documents and witnesses? Why can't John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney, I'm adding this, why can't they testify? They had firsthand knowledge. Yes,
that is a good question. It requires them to adhere to logic to
and
answer.
Be honest.
Although I guess they could say, because the conversations to which they would be testifying are privileged. There's always that claim. I mean, they're losing in that claim in court everywhere that they take it, but
right, exactly.
That would be it.
You know,
It's a legitimate process.
And I'm going to just before I go throw in two articles.
I don't care. Yeah, all right.
2 articles about what's going on with voting. One is from The Nation by Josh Holland.
This Nation.
What if Democrats have already won back enough white working class voters to win in 2020? Since the 80s, Democratic candidates have proven they can win elections while losing whites without a college degree by a significant margin. Maybe those West Virginia and Pennsylvania diners aren't really the best place to look for Democratic votes. Maybe.
Okay, that's an interesting thought.
Right. These debates miss quite a bit of evidence, direct and indirect, that Democrats have already won back enough white working class voters to compete next year. Since the 1980s, Democratic candidates have proven they can win elections while losing whites without a college degree by a significant margin. Obama won 36% of the vote. Clinton averaged 41%. And in 2020, the candidate will likely need to win a smaller share of white people without a degree because that group's long been declining, according to Gallup. Their share of the population has declined by 3 percentage points since 2014. And a study released by the Center for American Progress in October projects that next year their share of the electorate will be 2.3 points lower than it was in 2016. And the reality is Democratic candidates unlikely to do as poorly with this group as Hillary Clinton did for various and sundry reasons, including James Comey. So, that's part of the background there, and it just makes the Morning Consult polling just kind of interesting. The other one is from Bill Galston writing in the Wall Street Journal about Democratic centrist. Polarized America still has a big middle. In a new poll, 43% identify with the center, including 60% of independents. In this era of intense partisan polarization, it might seem odd, even quaint, to speak of a center of American politics, but a soon-to-be-released survey from the new center, as opposed to the old center, a bipartisan policy institute I helped start, suggests this term applies, albeit incompletely, to today's American public. Both political parties ignore the center at their peril. Now let's start with the definition. He says, suppose that for each issue, there's a continuum from one extreme to the other, on a scale of 1 to 10.
How could anyone suppose such a thing?
Then there'd be a meaningful center on an issue if more people placed their views on 3 than at a 1 or at a 5. Yes. And by this standard, people with centrist views constitute at least a plurality, meaning the largest faction when there's not a majority, on many questions at the heart of today's political contestation, starting with political identity. They asked to place themselves. 43% of respondents opted for the center, 34 for the right, 23 for the left.
Okay. I'll buy that.
So it's not unusual for the right to be described as more broad or a bigger number than the left, even though those people who identify themselves as the right will often approve of what we consider to be leftist policy. They just don't like being called leftist.
Right. All right.
Correct.
Yes.
Overall, there's a basis for saying that the U.S. is a centrist country that leans modestly to the right. And modestly means like hardly.
Okay. If you mean not, then I'm with you.
This fact coexists with a significantly polarized party system. 65% of Republicans identify with the right, 27% with the center, 8% with the left. 42% of Democrats identify with the left, same share with the center. Again, like many other polls, the Democrats are split between progressives and liberals on the one hand and moderates and centrists on the other. And that is part of the abiding reason for Joe Biden's strength in the polls, despite what Twitter says.
Okay.
That article doesn't say that. I'm telling you that. Okay. This leaves independents, who are anything but an ideological grab bag. Fully 60% identify with the center, 22 right, 17 left. So if you're talking about independents, the left is doing fine with them.
Okay.
Just as well as the right. But most of them don't see themselves as left or right. And this helps explain why states such as New Hampshire, whose primaries are open independents as well as party stalwarts, tend to produce distinctive and often unpredictable results. Now, I don't think New Hampshire and Iowa should go first, but I tend to think that New Hampshire is more interesting than Iowa.
Yes.
Why? Because independents you can just like register just about the day of the primary and vote whoever you want.
Okay.
I just think that's interesting.
Yes.
And I also think caucus is privileged people who have lots of time and,
True also.
Don't work 16-hour days. The whole idea, though, here is that it's also true on social issues. Pluralities reject the extremes of abortion on demand and total ban on the practice. Safe, legal, and rare is still like the thing. They favor balancing the rights of religious and secular people. That is to say, religious people should also have rights, which is a very leftist position, since the rightist position is only religious people should have rights.
Yes.
And they seek a middle way between a libertarian approach to social media and heavy-handed regulation of its content.
Okay.
Which is to say,
I didn't realize that was
it's
a huge issue. Yeah, true.
And it is. How do you balance free speech with what Facebook does?
Not easy.
Not easy.
Not real
because
speech.
Facebook cheats, and they do it for money. But then again, First Amendment.
Right. I mean, that is an interesting. Well, that's a whole other can of worms. Facebook and how they approach free speech with an algorithm. Free speech plus.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
Free speech as determined by the robot overlord. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Similarly, the First Amendment stands out as a core tenet of America's secular faith, more than 60% of Republicans, Democrats, and independents believe the right to free speech is nearly absolute, except when a speaker advocates violence. Well, that's a problem.
Or talks about
because
Barron.
Trump lies all the time. So am I free to lie, and am I free to just spread propaganda?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
These are complicated questions, but for the most part, the leaning for Americans is err on the side of free speech, err on the side of First Amendment, and then let's see what kind of mess we have and what we need to clean up.
We'll see what happens.
Right.
Okay.
Now, perhaps Donald Trump and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party are right that the country needs radical, even disruptive change. But the new Center surveys the latest research to show the American people don't want that. Now, where is that relevant? Well, just look no further than Medicare for all.
Oh, all right.
In fact, there's incredible disruption when it comes to Medicare for all, and that scares people. In fact, the upshot, Marco Sangerkatz in the New York Times today writes, why the less disruptive healthcare option, which is the public option, could be plenty disruptive in itself. Democrats like the optional part of the so-called public option, but the very existence of new governmental insurance could shake up the system. You can't have change without having change, So if you don't like the way things are, you're going to have to change, but that means disruption. You can't have change without disruption. So where do you balance on that? Well, I like the concept, but I don't want to pay billions for it.
Okay, don't.
All right, well then we're not doing the concept.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't have to pay the billions, but there's a lot of people out there. Together we can do that.
If my taxes have to go up in order to get Medicare for all, I'm not doing it.
People do say that, but
people vote that way too.
Yes.
A public option would
Then
be
they end
less
up being
disruptive
wrong.
than a plan that instantly eliminates private insurance, but a public option that's inexpensive and attractive could shake up the private market and wind up erasing some current insurance arrangements. Conversely, a public option that's expensive and unattractive might not do much good at all. Then again, it wouldn't change stuff, so it wouldn't upset people.
Well, sure. Also, doing nothing wouldn't change anything, but yet that would upset people, and I don't know what to do.
Larry Levitt, the expert at Kaiser Family Foundation and a pretty neutral guy, says the political appeal of the public option is that it preserves the choice of private insurance, but the better it works, the less likely it is to actually preserve the private insurance market.
Yeah, well, but then who do you blame for that?
Whoever instituted it.
Really? Okay. The people who...
That's an easy one. Even
sure,
I can answer that
I guess
one.
so. Right now, see, now you can't do that.
I blame
You'd be picking
Elizabeth
winners
Warren.
and
She had a
losers.
plan for that.
We used your brilliant free market situation to settle the question, and your guys lost. I don't know what to tell you.
Right. So it basically the practical answer is whoever's trying to do stuff, whether it's repeal Affordable Care Act or institute Medicare for all, whoever's trying to do stuff, that's who we blame.
Okay. I mean, I guess, until I get sick.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is there's lots of practical policy reasons why Medicare for all is a great idea and the public option is also a great idea. The practical aspects of politics is that none of this is going to be easy. It's all going to be disruptive. And America, centrist America, likes and prefers as little disruption as possible.
I guess so.
Again, that is Joe Biden's appeal. I'm just telling you this because people who are expecting him to fade away because he malapropism said something that doesn't sound really great, especially when you play it out of context, aren't going to understand how come, well, why doesn't his poll move?
I don't know. The other guy who can't speak, his polls don't move.
Exactly. That's really not what people are looking for. They're not looking for coherent policy wonks.
That's good.
If they were, Elizabeth Warren would be leading the polls.
Yeah. Oh, that's bad. I meant bad. I said good, but I meant bad. When I said you do a favor for us, I meant I'm a criminal.
Right. Anyway, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, according to Daily Kos,
Yes.
appeared on Capitol Hill Thursday morning to announce next steps in the impeachment of Donald J. Trump. Pelosi began by reviewing some of the same historical foundations for impeachment that were covered yesterday. Brief overview of the public hearings held before the Intelligence Committee. And then said the president leaves us no choice but to act because he's engaged once again in abuse of power. She then announced she was asking for Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler to proceed with articles of impeachment against Trump. So, yeah, it's happening, folks.
Good idea. Yeah.
Brief statement. That's all she said.
Okay.
Now action moves to the Senate. That's why Sam Stein's comment about Ken McConnell really justify blocking everything if, in fact, the senators agreed to a trial. And no, the discussion really isn't about an offhand comment about a play on words of the name of one of Trump's kids.
Tiffany.
The discussion is what happens when it goes to the Senate.
Yes, and it doesn't happen just yet. That will still take a little time, I guess. So Pelosi is saying go ahead. Sometime next week, I guess you would start seeing the draft.
They want this all done before Christmas, and then the trial will be in January. That's the plan.
That's what they would like, but they forgot how soon Christmas is coming.
There really is a war on Christmas. Isn't there?
Yeah, then there'll be a bigger one. The war. It'll be interesting to see how they settle the question of should we be doing this on Christmas, or how close to Christmas can we make this happen? It's December 5th. That gives 20 days. That's less than 3 weeks. They don't have articles of impeachment finalized yet, although I'm sure that there's a good draft already circulating.
Yeah, I mean finalized, but they're pretty much done.
Right. But it'll take them a week in the Judiciary Committee to get them hashed out, drafted, marked up, voted on, adopted, even at the full committee stage. I would think the best you could do in terms of speed for getting articles of impeachment brought to the House floor, which they have to do after the committee will adopt them, then they got to go to the full House. The full House has to vote on them. And they can do that in a day if they want to. But right. I'm thinking that they won't be able to mark up and adopt them simply by House rules and the amount of notice you have to give in considering things like this for another, until the week after. The week following next week, they might be able to get it on the floor. And they don't do Mondays, and Tuesday's a half a day, and so I would guess 2 weeks from now might be about the fastest we could expect to be able to say Donald J. Trump has been impeached.
But it's only the 5th. So
yes.
2 weeks from now is the 19th or 20th.
Yeah, that's right. And you're already lighting candles and counting down, and you're almost out of chocolate.
Yeah, but it's done.
And
then the trial is in January. Or if you get delayed, maybe you do it the first week in January. Mm-hmm. Are they back? When are they back?
Ordinarily,
are they back from their Christmas break in April? I forget.
Yeah,
I don't know what the schedule
ordinarily
is.
they're not back until like late January. I understand that that McConnell has put out a schedule that anticipates being back and in trial in January. I mean, that they can meet that part. It's just a matter of, and
then what happens is then the, February caucuses and New Hampshire vote come.
Yes.
And by then, maybe it'll be down to Biden and Buttigieg. Who knows? And so all the other senators can be back doing their thing.
Yeah, they could be. They're not excited about that, as they were pointing out in the analysis around yesterday's hearing that it's among one of the most tedious, boring things to do in the Senate is sit through an impeachment trial because there's rules about
can't
being
talk,
present.
Right? It's the managers who get to speak, and then a lot of the stuff's going to be decided by the Chief Justice, and you got to just sit there and show up.
Yeah.
Show up and shut up because you're the jury.
Right. That's what.
Like in most trials, the jury doesn't get to do a lot of grandstanding.
No, they're going to be very upset about that. I don't know whether it's really going to bother the people running for president quite as much as they keep saying it will bother them. I think they're going to be just fine speaking to the press after session every day.
It's like a day off.
So
I don't have to rush to 19 different things, and I'm late, and what's going on, and the bus broke, and this and that, and everything else.
That could be quite relaxing, I guess. But they for some reason, they think it's a great thing to be out there shaking hands in New Hampshire.
Well, they say it is.
Right, but I don't think they really love it that much.
Exactly. So, not bad for them either. Anyway, so that's a state of the art in terms of what's going on here. I got to throw in this breaking news, though, about Israel because I thought it was interesting. Prime Minister Netanyahu's personal attorney and confidant indicted for money laundering in a $2.2 billion submarine affair. Businessman accused of bribing former Navy commander to tune of $160,000. Case involves massive military acquisition. So I've been trying to figure out, is this Netanyahu's Michael Cohen or is it Netanyahu's Rudy Giuliani?
Good question. Submarines, they were actually making an actual submarine. Is that what was happening? Is that a?
Well, it's a Navy commander, so I think so.
Well, okay. Abby says yes, a submarine. Okay. We'll check that out. I'm curious. I didn't realize they had submarines, or maybe we weren't supposed to know, and that was
not
part
supposed
of
to know.
Oh, see, all right. Well,
They have to stop smuggling off the coast.
I guess that's true.
Now, these are not
But all the smuggling is
intercontinental
going on
ballistic
above the
nuclear
water.
submarines, but they do have coastal responsibilities and so on and so forth. Anyway,
All right.
that's the news. So we'll see what happens, and
see what
I will talk to you on Monday.
Yes, we'll see what happens then. I might get a submarine between now and then. $5 foot-long submarine. Can't wait. Okay. I'll order that $5. See ya, and see ya, Abby. Have a good time. Enjoy the squirrels and the neighbors. Thanks very much, Greg. Okay, we'll wrap it up there. And, look, we're almost all the way to 10 o'clock. Thanks for the extended segment. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss things just a little further. Let's run back to the other source of our information, Twitter and Pocket, where we have stashed everything. There's some very interesting side stories coming up today. Look at this. Where did I get this one from? I don't even know. All right. But this one was very interesting. I don't know that there's a lot of attention being paid to this one yet, but I thought this one was funny, and it fits in with the various impeachment stories in a tangential way. Politico reporting yet another loss in court for Team Trump. This one about a guy you may already have forgotten about, Matthew Whitaker. Remember when he was alleged to be the acting attorney general, and we didn't really know whether he was or he wasn't because Trump and paperwork, and nobody ever actually saw the paper that purported to appoint him to this position, and they hid it for a while, and there's really some major questions still looming, but we'll never get to those because we're too distracted by, mentioning the name Tiffany and or Barron or whatever. But this is one of the great frustrations, I think, of the whole impeachment saga will be the number of things that by themselves were extraordinarily important and really deserve thorough investigation and attention and correction, but which we'll never get to because the volume of such things is just too large. Anyway, the piece is entitled, Judge Orders Release of Acting AG Whitaker's Financial Documents. The judge rejected DOJ's bid for a categorical rule allowing secrecy for draft financial disclosures. This seemed to me to be a very, let's say, interesting legal theory and completely wrong. But I wanted to see, I got to skim through the article to make sure that it is what I think it is. Josh Gerstein wrote this piece up. A federal judge has turned down the Justice Department's bid to keep secret several financial disclosure forms that, again, Attorney General Matthew Whitaker submitted before his filings were formally accepted by ethics officials. So far, this seems to be lining up the way I imagined it. Here's the word acting again, but it's not quite the same. But why not use it on a Freedom of Information suit? We'll just get rid of the ing on that one. Acting on a Freedom of Information Act suit brought by BuzzFeed, very active in this area. U.S. District Court Judge Trevor McFadden ruled Wednesday that the draft financial disclosures are not eligible for protection under an exemption protecting the confidentiality of policymaking debates. This is really something. The court is unpersuaded by DOJ's deliberative process arguments. I just heard Armando laugh and fall out of his chair. Deliberative process arguments, wrote McFadden, an appointee of President Donald Trump, by the way. Whitaker's draft forms do not bear the mark of the deliberative process. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, and I really should just continue with the article to see if there's any more nuance to it, but what this really looks like to me is Whitaker, having been allegedly appointed, acting attorney general, is filing his financial disclosure forms, and it might even be the ones he filed as whatever he was, deputy. I don't even remember anymore what position he held before he was purportedly named acting AG. But he's filing his financial disclosure forms, and essentially what he's doing here, it appears that the game he's playing is, like most, well, maybe like most people, but certainly like most Trumpsters, what he's looking for is, what's the absolute minimum amount of disclosure I have to do here in order to be compliant? And I guess the Trumpster spin on this is, as opposed to I want to maintain my own, maintain my privacy to the extent practicable. He's thinking more along the lines of what can I lie about and get away with it? And so he's submitting these forms, which are, I guess, technically designated drafts until they're accepted by the ethics watchdogs who are in charge of filing these things. How is it? As they say, formally accepted by ethics officials. However you want to designate them. So he's making these submissions to ethics officials, and the ethics officials are saying, no, we won't accept this one. This leaves out, this, that, and the other asset, or you misreport this, or you state the range of the values of the assets too broad. I don't know what their actual objections were. Maybe the actual objections are listed later in the article. But the point is, he's submitting financial disclosure forms that don't cut the mustard, so to speak. And the officials are saying, we won't accept this. And, well, it's okay. You're not going to you're not going to be prosecuted about this because you haven't yet submitted a form that is being entered onto the record as your official one. So we can't hold you to the claims that are made in this one if we find out something different just yet, because you're still in the process of filing it. But essentially what you're doing is you're filing forms that don't cut it in terms of honesty and trying to protect against the disclosure of those dishonest statements that you made about your own finances under the guise of it being a deliberative process. Now, deliberative process, of course, is actually something that's a privilege that would ordinarily apply as between, say, you and your attorney in formulating your defense if you're a criminal defendant or a civil defendant, or you and your policy advisors if you're trying to come up with a public policy, not you and the ethics officials to whom you're reporting. That's completely different. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Unfortunately, time break there. What I really wanted to get to was to say that essentially, not only is he misconstruing the idea of deliberative process, in that there's no deliberative privilege as between you and officials to whom you are making these disclosures. I imagine what was happening here, and again, we still need to get some more detail, but if it's the case that you were submitting these things and saying, is this right? Then you're looking at a paper that was intended to be published as a public disclosure document, and now saying, oh, I don't want that document publicly disclosed because it was rejected by the ethics watchdogs. Now, it wasn't rejected, wasn't your lawyer sent it back and said, no, you need to be a little more forthcoming here. This is the ethics officials saying, no, we won't agree that you're in compliance with law until you add more to this disclosure. But if they had accepted it, in other words, if you had finally hit the target of the minimally acceptable financial disclosure form, your intention was for that to be published as a disclosure document. To now turn around and say, oh, I want that hidden away from view. I don't want that disclosed. It should remain private because I failed, because I lied too much, is not really a great excuse. It's almost like, as I was talking about it on Twitter this morning, it's like going to the court, at the end of your trial and saying, well, Your Honor, I believe I'm entitled to leniency in my sentencing before this court because of my agreement to comply with the process. And after all, I saved the court a lot of time and resources expended by entering my guilty plea. And the judge would say, what are you talking about? Guilty plea. You pled not guilty and put us through a 6-week trial. You're not entitled to leniency for cooperation. You didn't cooperate. And the defendant, Whitaker, coming back here and saying, well, it's not while it's true, it's not the case that I didn't plead guilty. The point is we did eventually, through a deliberative process, arrive at the fact of my guilt. I acknowledge that the court thinks that I'm guilty, and I'm here for sentencing, so I'm cooperating. But who cares whether I initially pled not guilty and then forced the state to prove its case against me over the course of 6 weeks? The point is not so much that it took a long time to get here, but what you shouldn't be doing in taking into consideration my claim that I was cooperative is you shouldn't be considering my not guilty plea or the trial. All of that should be off the record because it should be protected by the deliberative process privilege. This whole trial was just you and me going back and forth about whether or not I was guilty. Now, initially, I took the position that I was not. And you took the position that I was, not the judge, but the prosecutor. And we finally did come to an agreement. But it wasn't that I was maintaining my innocence. It was I was just simply bargaining with you, deliberating with you about how guilty am I and what might I be guilty of. And now that we've arrived at a conclusion, I don't think all of that should be held against me in sentencing. Well, it wouldn't work. And I guess it didn't work here either. The court is unpersuaded by the DOJ's deliberative process arguments. And remember, he forced the DOJ, the actual government, spent its money making this stupid argument on his behalf, not him. He should have to pay for this. The court is unpersuaded by the DOJ's deliberative process arguments, wrote McFadden, an appointee of President Donald Trump. Whitaker's draft forms do not bear the mark of the deliberative process. McFadden noted that BuzzFeed was not seeking emails detailing the back and forth between Whitaker and his colleagues about the filings, but simply the forms themselves. In other words, things that he was submitting, intending that they be published. That's a hell of a way to establish deliberative process, don't you think? While the judge rejected DOJ's bid for a categorical rule allowing secrecy for draft financial disclosures, he said he will allow the department to delete on privacy grounds any information that did not make it into the final reports, i.e. never became published, right? Because justice officials decided Whitaker was not required to disclose it. So some of the things that he omitted that they decided, that's okay, you don't have to disclose it, those things they'll allow to be redacted from the draft. So I guess, and it was DOJ officials he was talking to. And by the way, how does that go? The deliberative process between the supposedly Attorney General and DOJ staff about what needs to be disclosed. And if you're the AG, you can lean on those people, like say, maybe if you continue to insist that I have to include these things, you could be fired or reassigned. So it probably wasn't a great process to begin with. But any omissions by Whitaker will be evident from the drafts, and any inaccurate or incomplete details that were later changed will be left in the new versions to be made public, McFadden ruled. So again, what you would get here once if they ever get around to actually forcing those pages to be disclosed, is you would get a look at the earlier attempts by Whitaker to describe his financial situation and be able to compare his final accepted disclosure to his attempts at disclosure along the way. I'm worth $10, $20, $30, $50,000, $100, $1 million. I have $1 million in assets. And you would be able to wonder to yourself in reviewing these documents, why did he pretend he was worth so much less? Or why did he pretend this asset was worth more, perhaps, than it really is worth? I'd be curious to find out what's in these things. BuzzFeed must have some idea. Anyway, Whitaker was required, of course, to submit a financial disclosure soon after he became Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Chief of Staff on October 2017. So there we have, I guess that's when he first had to make this financial disclosure. I don't know whether he had to make another one upon assuming higher office, but that doesn't actually matter. More to the point is he was asked to file a financial disclosure and took his sweet time doing it and tried several times to get it right and didn't. And we'd like to see what's in those papers. However, For reasons that are unclear, Whitaker's initial disclosure was not fully processed by Justice's ethics personnel until about a year later. That's interesting, too. When President Donald Trump bypassed the DOJ's usual lines of succession, which was also weird, to name Whitaker as acting Attorney General after Sessions resigned. So that's interesting, too. I mean, all by itself, we should be wondering, why did DOJ sit on his financial disclosure for a year? Part of the reason may be we have so many to check through. Part of the other reason may be nobody ever really nominated him to the judge he moved up to AG from. And no one noticed because we're just extraordinarily sloppy with paperwork and no one gives a damn because so many other fires are burning at any given time. In a declaration filed with McFadden in the BuzzFeed suit in July, Justice Ethics Officer Cynthia Shaw attributed the oversight to administrative error. And I mean, it's a thing you can get away with. It might even be true, but that's what they're saying. We didn't check his financial disclosure form because administrative error. And you might be forced to accept that one. Late last year, another justice official gave a similar explanation to Senate Democrats who inquired about the delay. In his opinion resolving the case, the judge said that there are 7 draft versions of Whitaker's initial report and 7 drafts of his annual report for 2017. Shaw argued against the release of the drafts, saying it would be a disservice to the public and would discourage candor between filers and ethics office personnel. Such disclosure would result in the public seeing reports that are incorrect, she wrote. Well, now, by the way, filing a false report would also result in the public seeing a report that is incorrect, and that's not a big problem. But anyway, she says if filers believe that all iterations before finalization are going to be released, they may be less willing to work with their ethics officials to correct the report. Well, then that's fine. Then they'll just be brought up on charges of filing false reports. I'm not that worried about that, quite honestly. Whitaker, a former U.S. attorney in Iowa, gave up his attorney general duties in February 2019, because they never belonged to him, I would tell you, following the confirmation of Bill Barr, or maybe he was confirmed. I don't really know whether he was actually nominated or not. Bill Barr may or may not be the attorney general of the United States. Who knows? Whitaker left the department a couple weeks later. His finances came under scrutiny over the $1.2 million in salary he was paid by the obscure legal ethics nonprofit Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust between 2014 and 2017, as well as his work for a patent marketing firm that settled fraud allegations with the Federal Trade Commission last year. See, they could have used fraud guarantee there. Whitaker's appointment as acting attorney general led to several legal challenges, but courts found them moot after Barr took over and ratified the department's earlier decisions. Okay, so there's a lot wrapped up in that one, including the questions we have about who is or should be attorney general and whether or not they were validly nominated, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, at the heart of this, we still don't know what's up with getting $1.2 million in salary from these weird, dark money, ethical, supposedly legal ethics nonprofits that nobody knows anything about. Well, we still don't know about that, but I guess that's what we'll find out when we get to dig into these documents. I just thought that was just another bizarre legal theory that they floated that got shot down. And it's interesting to note it got shot down by a Trump-appointed judge, which sort of opens the door to a brief mention, anyway, of it. Here is a Trump-appointed judge, and Trump still can't get what he wants out of some Trump-appointed judges. That should alleviate some of our concerns about Trump-appointed judges, except that the problem is that Trump's reaction to not getting what he wants, even out of Trump-appointed judges, is to start appointing more people who receive unanimous ratings of not qualified from the Bar Association. I can't get a person who's got formal legal training to agree with my stupid theories about how I want to, I want laws that allow Donald J. Trump and his friends to get off and everybody else, especially people I hate, to be convicted. Can I have that? And the lawyers who are formally trained and who have passed the bar and who have worked in courtrooms and tried cases don't like that. They don't want to go along with it. So Trump needs to find people who will agree to go along with it. Well, if you could save $100,000 by not going to law school, but assure Donald Trump that if you appoint me to a job for life, deciding cases based on, certainly not based on the law, because I don't know what that is, because I didn't go to law school. I saved the money. But if you'll give me a lifetime appointment to a job that pays $180,000, $190,000 a year anyway, sure, I'll rule in your favor and against your enemies. Can I have that? Yes, you can, because now we have a Republican Senate with 50 votes in it, and they don't, pardon me, they don't care, apparently, when somebody comes before them who is unanimously believed by the entirety of the reviewing authority at the American Bar Association to be not qualified. Maybe those people who aren't qualified, because they're not qualified, and part of their lack of qualifications is their interest in doing my bidding and punishing my enemies, maybe they will help me out in ways that these formally trained actual lawyers won't. Imagine having to rely on that to hold together our system of justice. Well, you don't imagine no longer. It's happening right before your very eyes. Another thing, by the way, that William Barr is up to that deserves some mention. I have the Washington Post's report on it from yesterday, though I think he did it the day before yesterday. It took him a day to talk about it. William Barr says, quote, communities, and you're supposed to like wink, wink, nudge, nudge at that. That's why they put it in little quotes. William Barr says communities that protest cops could lose, quote, the police protection they need, unquote. That's a quote not only because that's exactly how he said it, but because it's scare quotes. Like some of these quote unquote communities, scare quote communities, they are real communities, but that's meant to mean black people. Those communities, those are the ones we're talking about, right? If you protest cops, then you won't get, quote, the police protection you need. Well, for one thing, a lot of them aren't getting protection per se out of the police. And good question as to any of it is what they need. So a little double entendre there. Tim Elfrink wrote this piece up, but the basics of it are all we really need, I think. Speaking to a room full of police officers and prosecutors on Tuesday, Attorney General William P. Barr drew a parallel between protests against soldiers during the Vietnam War, because that's what domestic policing is, a war against us. So that's treason. But hey, ignore that for a second. And demonstrations against law enforcement today. That's the parallel. Protests against Vietnam War soldiers, demonstrations against law enforcement today. But this time he suggested those who don't show, quote, respect to authority could lose access to police services. Imagine that. Today, the American people have to focus on something else, which is the sacrifice and the service that is given by our law enforcement officers. And they have to start showing, more than they do, the respect and support that law enforcement deserves, Barr said in pointed remarks delivered at a Justice Department ceremony to honor police officers, who are not actually part of the Justice Department. But okay. Barr added that if communities don't give that support and respect, they might find themselves without the police protection they need. Interesting. So, bit of a protection racket. If you don't pay, something might happen to your business, for instance. Although Barr didn't specify what communities he was referencing, activists decried his speech as a clear attack on minorities who have protested police brutality and other racially skewed law enforcement abuses. Barr's words are as revealing as they are disturbing, flagrantly dismissive of the rights of Americans of color, disrespectful to countless law enforcement officers who work hard to serve their communities, and full of a continuing disregard for the rule of law. Jeb Fain, spokesperson for liberal super PAC American Bridge, told HuffPost, which first reported the comments. That's why I took an extra day for the Washington Post to get on it. Okay. Anyway, that there's a lot to this, and it deserves a lot of attention. But by the way, just wanted to throw this one out there. Given that Trump just left under dark circumstances, the NATO conference, had that not happened, it wouldn't really make much difference. But had he stayed for the entirety of the conference, I'm sure he would have used more of the time. He already used some of the time. He used more of the time to complain that he hates the NATO alliance, and that he, as Harrod reported over the past couple of days, would refuse to commit to the defense of NATO allies should they come under attack. His big thing being, I keep saying, he says, that the other countries aren't paying their fair share for the common defense through NATO. And I don't see why the United States should expend blood and treasure, to put it in classic economics terms, to defend countries that aren't doing the same, that aren't sacrificing their own treasure, or presumably blood as well, in the defense of Europe, or anywhere else for that matter. But NATO focuses on Europe. And I thought that was interesting. The idea, I mean, it makes sense to his base, right? They love the idea that if you don't pay your fair share, you won't be able to enjoy the benefits of the protection of this alliance. And I wondered whether there might be a parallel to be made there. And prompted to it by our Twitter friend, Der Wouter, who prompted the thought that I kind of developed into my own wording of it. But the idea was, I wonder if you could expand that to our own alliance, the federal alliances between our several states. And should it be the case, for instance, that Secret Service protection ought to end for presidents who can't prove definitively that they're paying their fair share for the common defense? We've never seen his taxes, and there's probably a good reason why. And while we all thought it was all about just transparency, that presidents should disclose their taxes, we should get to see whether they are taking personal advantage of tax proposals that they're making, and whether they are inuring to their personal benefit but not anyone else's, or too much to them and not enough to the rest of us, or what have you. And are you paying? But yeah, we never really think of it because no one has yet refused. But now, in this case with Donald Trump, I think we're all thinking, yeah, he's hiding his taxes because it would demonstrate very clearly that he, like old Europe, is not paying his fair share for our common defense. And what about that? Why wouldn't you want to do something like that? If you don't value the protection that the police are giving you because you protest the way they're doing their job, even if you're right, you might lose that protection. Well, if you are, I don't know whether you're protesting anything or not, but although like libertarians like to say they're protesting by not paying their taxes. But if you're not paying, I just think that they should take some combination of the way Barr thinks we ought to react to some sort of shortcoming by American citizens and withhold police protection from that cadre of citizens who come up short, and combine that with Trump's view of how to deal with common defense issues through NATO, and it seems pretty clear. There should be no Secret Service protection until you show you've paid your bill. In fact, by the way, while he was overseas, one of the things we didn't get to mention here was in his discussion on camera with President of France, Emmanuel Macron, they had some disagreement about the nature of the NATO alliance in general. But Trump made some offhand reference, by the way, when the discussion veered to NATO cooperation with migration issues, mentioning, oh, by the way, over in Syria, we have all those ISIS fighters under lock and key, as he says. But Trump semi-threatened, he had that ability. If you'd like, I can send some of those nice ISIS fighters your way. Send them to France, which is, of course, a bit of a terroristic threat. And I was just thinking, if the French authorities found it necessary to detain our president for making terroristic threats against France, ordinarily the United States would say protest or make clear that they would register their displeasure along the spectrum of options available to us, which would all underlying all of it would, of course, be the reminder, if not an outright threat, that the United States commands a vast military. Not that we would come to blows with France over these things, but that's only because they would recognize that and not do something as silly as arrest our president for making terroristic threats. But if they did, and it came to it, and we had to defend or even legally defend, say, send people to a courtroom to argue that this ought not to be allowed, the detention of the American president for making terroristic threats against France, that would, cost money, taxpayer money. We need to have money on hand in order to be able to do that. And if you can't show that you've paid the bills, I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to mount a defense on your behalf. I'm sorry. You're a billionaire, though. Don't worry about it. Surely you can pay for your defense by yourself, right? Just wanted to point that out. But of course, that's logic and good for the goose, good for the gander, that sort of thing. And they don't operate that way. They're Gimritarians. They want what they want, and they don't want what they don't like, and that's that, and that should be the law. So, we'll see whether that sticks or flies with anybody else. Okay, also following up on stuff that Greg touched on earlier today, Nancy Pelosi, of course, giving the green light to go ahead with the impeachment, the articles of impeachment, to take the next step for the Judiciary Committee to begin meeting to discuss, plan, draft, mark up, adopt articles of impeachment against Trump. And I think, they shouldn't stop there, but I think that's where you'll see it stop. They should be considering articles of impeachment against several Trump administration officials, but they'll probably limit it to just Trump. Anyway, why would she do that? She's already explained herself in terms of the legal and constitutional and existential dangers that we face if we don't go ahead with this thing. But we'll add this to the pile. Rudy Giuliani is right now, I think, as we speak, at least he was yesterday, in Kiev, as we now say, used to say Kiev, interviewing former Ukrainian prosecutors, including Lutsenko, going ahead essentially with all of the stupid, wacko conspiracy theory investigation that he was trying to do all along, and which we're finding out more and more about as we delve into this, the issues in this impeachment inquiry. But right in the middle of all this, when we are reaching the conclusion that he ought to be impeached for launching this idiotic crusade and trying to shut down a real investigation of his own corruption, Giuliani is out there doing all the same things. So it's pretty clear that there's, as we discussed, was it yesterday? There's really no stopping, I guess it was Tuesday, no stopping Donald Trump and all this. He's going to do what he wants to do until somebody physically puts a stop to it. So in terms of the wisdom of going ahead with these articles of impeachment, you really do have no choice because the crime continues right in front of our eyes. So the only way to put a stop to it, well, there are two ways. The way we're going to try first is the constitutional method, the peaceful method of saying, yeah, well, you're no longer president now, so just stop that. These resources were never at your command legitimately. Now they're definitely not at your command because you're not president anymore. Even if we never get there, we got to try and mark that out. But important to note that, yeah, they're going to continue to try to pull off this same crime until you put an end to it. By the way, let's see. Oh, another item from yesterday's hearing that I thought was worth pointing out. I picked up this tweet from Tim Mack, M-A-K, the NPR reporter who was covering, or one of several probably, covering the hearings yesterday, noting that Professor Carlin made a particularly interesting point among many. I like this one, though. And this is what makes constitutional scholars such interesting commentators on these things. Trying to fill in the blanks of what the founders meant is always a challenge. But you do have a few clues, and conservatives keep pretending that they're very interested in what the founders were thinking. So this is some good interpolation here. Carlin's point was, if you become a U.S. citizen, right, you can become any position in this country, even Secretary of State, right? But you can't become president, and I think maybe they're assuming here that you can't also become vice president because you need to be able to step up at a moment's notice, but that's not settled law yet. But you can become anything, any public official, public office you want to pursue, you can once you become a U.S. citizen, except one, president, right? Why? Well, Carlin argues here, it's because the founders were so worried about foreign influence that they went ahead and included the natural-born citizen clause. Even so worried were they about the possibility of foreign influence in the presidency that they said, even if you are a naturalized citizen, you can't attain that office. Interesting. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, so as we left off, I thought it was a great point, right? That's just by way of emphasizing how serious the founders would likely have thought it was that the president should be so obviously under foreign influence. Would it be an impeachable offense by itself? And the answer is probably yes, because it was clear that they were so interested, so worried about even the slightest foreign influence. I mean, really, the argument that that another country, that a foreign country, your original, I guess, thinking of your country of origin, would have so much influence over you, even as someone who emigrated and went through the sometimes arduous, and maybe not then arduous, but now arduous process of becoming a United States citizen, could still feel the influence of foreign governments, even ones you actively left and renounced citizenship under. So, worth noting, to say the least. And so, well, there you go. I've noted it. Now, there's more. Other stories that we can jump around a little bit and get to that don't necessarily progress naturally from where we are. So we'll do that jumping around. This one relates, I guess you could put it in the basket of other Trump losses in court. You probably should put it under that file, because the headline of the piece I'm going to read here from Mark Sumner over at the front page of Daily Kos from the other day is, Trump loses in court again. Yes, again. This time, a judge ruling that Deutsche Bank must provide those loan documents. So it's a couple days removed here. Maybe you heard this news. Maybe you didn't in the rush of impeachment inquiries, but we'll catch up on it here. Even before he entered the White House, Mark writes, Donald Trump had made more than 3,000 appearances in court, or rather his name had anyway, as defendant. He didn't appear in courtroom in all of those trials, I don't think. Anyway, many of them, of course, were related to his tendency to promise to pay now, but actually pay never. It's not clear how many of those 3,000 cases Trump lost, but for many of them, the point was never about the verdict. It was about punishing some smaller company by throwing Trump's current salaried fixer at it and forcing it to either expend thousands or settle for a fraction of what it was owed. Fortunately for Trump, it doesn't really work that way when Congress is on the other side of the courtroom, or rather, unfortunately for Trump, fortunately for us. Again and again, Trump has tried to block access to his tax filings, his business dealings, and his instructions to White House officials. Again and again, he has lost those fights in court. Back in May, a U.S. District Court judge ruled against both Trump and his children to declare that Deutsche Bank and Capital One were actually required to turn over financial documents they held from the Trumps to Congress in response to subpoenas. We've been hearing more and more about those, right? Like Frederick Douglass. Both banks had been blocked from providing information after Trump sued on claims of personal privacy. The May ruling was particularly important because it specifically stated that Congress has the right to conduct investigations of the executive branch. And part of this is just Trump thinks he should get his way on everything. Possibly part of it is that Trump still doesn't really quite understand. I don't understand. As a private person, as a private citizen and businessman, I have, not always, but sometimes succeeded in claiming that my right to personal privacy should trump, no pun intended, the claims of others against information that is relevant to the situation, but never really considered, it seems, the possibility that, well, that dynamic may change when you are president of the United States and are handed so much power and flexibility and so many strange, to the rest of us, and unusual prerogatives in policymaking and affecting the lives of others. We need to be able to probe into what motivates you, including your finances, a little more closely when you're president of the United States than when you are essentially nobody and are not supposed to have any official ability to influence the lives of so many others. Although $1 billion, if you even have that, even the illusion of billions of dollars, will go a long way towards affording you prerogatives that you really have no right to. And that's a totally separate discussion about the direction this country has gone in. Anyway, the Department of Justice immediately appealed that case on Trump's orders. And, did we say this? Yes, that's right. The ruling from May was important because it specifically stated Congress has the right to conduct these investigations. They appealed anyway on Trump's orders, and that's important. And between administrative stays and formal appeals, the documents are still sitting, we hope, at Deutsche Bank. But that may not remain the case much longer because they might burn them on Trump's behalf, but really because he might lose again. On Tuesday, a federal appeals court rejected Trump's effort to block the release, stating that Congress's need to pursue its legislative function is, quote, a far more significant public interest than whatever public interest there may be in protecting Trump's private financial transactions. The DOJ's appeal was denied, the administrative stay lifted, and the documents held, we hope, by Deutsche Bank are theoretically now to be released. However, it can be expected that the Trump bar DOJ will hop in one last time in hopes that Judge I Like Beer will act to prevent Deutsche Bank from revealing the details of Trump's loans. After all, you probably shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Judge I Like Beer, now Justice I Like Beer, is sitting in a spot vacated for him by his former mentor, Justice Kennedy, whose son was the loan officer at Deutsche Bank that approved these stupid things. But that's neither here nor there, I'm sure. Multiple sources, Mark continues, have indicated that Trump is anxious to cover up details of those loans, at least in part because he claimed much greater value for some of his assets when reporting them on loan applications than he did when reporting those same assets for tax purposes, which would be a violation, a story we've already covered, of course. This ruling was made at almost the same time that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who ruled last week that former White House counsel Don McGahn must obey congressional subpoenas to testify before the impeachment inquiry, removed a stay on that order. It's unclear at this point whether the Supreme Court would accept a further appeal of the appeals court's decision on the Deutsche Bank documents, but it certainly seems possible, considering the other aspects of congressional authority versus executive privilege already before the court. It seems likely that the current Supreme Court is going to have a chance to define the previously blurry boundaries of executive versus congressional authority, and it's going to do it while being helmed by an overwhelmingly conservative majority that believes heavily in the unitary executive theory. Trump just lost another big one in court, but there's still a chance he's going to make America the big loser in the long run. That's true. And also, just for the record, we might also point out here that it seems likely that the current Supreme Court is going to have a chance to define the previously blurry boundaries of executive versus congressional authority, and it's going to do it while helming through its Chief Justice an impeachment inquiry into that president's activities. So that's, that could be confuse the issue as well. Remember also, though, the flip side of that, there was the theory floated the other day that maybe, just maybe, by moving quickly with impeachment and bringing it to the Senate under the presiding, how would we say this? Under the presidency, I guess, of the Chief Justice sitting as presiding officer for the trial. It might give legacy-conscious John Roberts the chance to take a first crack at making decisions about what privileges will and won't stand as against congressional prerogatives for oversight, rather than taking them to court as, say, Jonathan Turley might have preferred. His whole argument yesterday was that things were moving too quickly and that there ought to, that the House ought to be seeking rulings from the Article 3 courts. And I guess now we have to include the Supreme Court and all that, since they appeal everything on the Trump side. Essentially, he's saying you should get the Supreme Court to rule on every one of those subpoenas, and then we'll find out how much material you can develop by way of evidence. Now, of course, that holds out the possibility that that the Supreme Court, either legitimately or corruptly, could yet decide that there will be no subpoena enforcement. I would say that was a corrupt decision, but others may disagree. And if 5 of the right people disagree, then I'm wrong, period, end of sentence, because that's the system we have, unless, of course, we overthrow it or kill the other side, or whatever. Or just ignore those judges until they die, or can be, in the case of Scalia, murdered by Donald Trump. Oh, I didn't say that out loud. Whatever it is. And be replaced by others, some of whom may not even be qualified to operate in a courtroom, period. But no matter, as long as you have 50 votes. Anyway, all of that could yet happen. But I guess Turley's theory is you might yet find out that you're not entitled to that information, in which case you're likely to lose, so don't go ahead. Or you may find out that you are entitled to this information, in which case the case presented against the president would no longer necessarily be, as he said, wafer thin, and then we'd all be okay and on the same page, and all 4 legal authorities who testified yesterday would agree that the president ought to be impeached and removed from office, but Republican senators will ignore all of that and keep him in office anyway, while reserving the right to remove a Democrat in the future who may or may not have done anything at all, based on the fact that that's what they feel like doing. Okay, just wanted to throw that one out there. Let's see, other stories to touch on. We did have that one. No, we can save that one perhaps for a Friday roundup. Well, no, let's name it now. The Washington Post, we'll just call this one right out. This is extraneous material, I think. You never know. Nick Miroff, M-I-R-O-F-F, and Josh Dawsey on this piece from the Second. North Dakota company that Trump touted gets $400 million border wall contract. Somebody was going to get the contract, of course. But just as you suspected, what's essentially happening here is all of the money is going to end up getting put in the pockets of Trump supporters, hangers-on, personal friends, and what have you. A company that President Trump urged military officers to hire for border wall construction has been awarded a $400 million contract to build a span of new barrier across an Arizona wildlife refuge. Terrific. According to a Defense Department announcement Monday. North Dakota-based Fisher Sand and Gravel won the contract to build in the Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge in Yuma County, Arizona, the Defense Department said, with the target completion date of December 30th, 2020. And of course, you would hire the sand and gravel company to build that metal wall because something. Maybe it's being put into sand and they think that that's enough for them. Do they have the experience to do it? I don't know. Maybe the article reveals something about that. It may or may not be related to everything else we're talking about. After all, we're still not sure because Trump and paperwork, man. That $400 million that was supposed to go to Ukraine actually got there, are we? So maybe it ended up paying his friends at North Dakota-based Fisher Sand and Gravel instead. I doubt it, but I'm just saying we don't know for sure. We can't really be sure until we get to the bottom of this. We might have, you don't know. We don't know whether, in fact, I don't know that North Dakota-based Fisher Sand and Gravel won the contract at all. Maybe Ukraine did. That's what people are saying. We'll have to look into it. There's no facts anymore. Anyway, I'll just add one or two more of the paragraphs here. Trump has repeatedly pushed Fisher to get a wall building contract. Doesn't matter where it happens, right? Because they're in North Dakota. They don't care whether they build in Arizona, Texas, New Mexico. Makes no difference to them. We don't care what contract you give them, just give them one. That's how qualified they are. He's repeatedly pushed Fisher for this contracting, urging officials with the Army Corps of Engineers to pick the firm, only to be told that Fisher's bids did not meet standards. That's a problem. Trump's entreaties on behalf of the company have concerned some officials, they might even want to run to the Inspector General on this, who are unaccustomed to a president getting personally involved in the intricacies of government contracting. Weird, right? Trump has been enamored with Tommy Fisher, the company's chief executive, who has made multiple appearances on Fox News to promote his firm and insists that it would do a better job than those the government has already chosen. The company's attorneys did not immediately respond to requests for comment late Monday. Senator Kevin Cramer, who we always forget about, he's from North Dakota. He's a Fisher booster, too, and has taken the case to the Oval Office. He argued that the company could build the wall faster than any of the current Army Corps contractors. Trump has grown upset in recent months that so few miles have been built, given his campaign promises to construct hundreds of miles of wall. In a statement, Kramer said the company plans to build 31 miles of new barrier. So I guess someone should do the math on that one. $400 million, 31 miles. Is it a good deal? I don't know. You tell me. I don't think any of it is a good deal, so you're not likely to convince me. Just thought I'd throw that one out there. There's more to the article. I encourage you to read it in your own time so that we can read a little bit more of other items instead and catch up on a couple other things. In the fast-growing category of Jared Kushner portfolios, government portfolios, not his investment portfolio, though they are sometimes the same thing, and probably that is the case here. CNBC reports that Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, takes a bigger role in China trade talks. Sure, why not? I think it was a week or so ago that we were learning that he was adding the wall construction to his portfolio. So I suppose that does make a natural progression of stories, doesn't it? I wonder if Fisher Sand and Gravel ended up with $400 million in their pockets, thanks at all to Jared Kushner, or whether that one was all on Donald Trump himself. CNBC reported this one. CNBC carried this one, though it is a Reuters report. Looks pretty short. We can run through the whole thing here. Jared Kushner has added another role to his long list of White House duties, U.S.-China trade negotiator. As Washington and Beijing try to reach an initial agreement to avoid new U.S. tariffs on December 15th. Don't forget, that's coming up too, right? We're 10 days away from that. And when that deadline was kicked to November 15th, I believe we paused for a moment to point out that might get in the way, might come down right in the middle of Christmas shopping season, holiday shopping season, one might call it, if one wanted to start a war, for instance, on Christmas. I don't know whether it would really kick in fast enough to make a real dent or not, but it seemed like a weird place to drop that new deadline. And, of course, handing this over to Jared Kushner makes about 0 sense. He's got Middle East peace on his plate. Now he's got the wall. He had, I don't know, he had all sorts of other things. There was criminal justice reform. That one he tells us is done, I think. But, and any number of other stupid things that don't make any sense for him to be handling are under his umbrella now. And as we said, good question as to whether or not there's personal profit in there for him, given that his wife, Ivanka, holds so many Chinese trademarks, which seem to rain down on her magically for no particular reason. Anyway, I know the Chinese are now pushing for a resolution to some of these things and asking that tariffs come down immediately in order to facilitate reaching an agreement, or they're tying the agreement to the lowering of those tariffs. People familiar with the talk said Kushner, who helped bring the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement to fruition, that is extraordinary credit they're giving him for that, has increased his direct involvement in the negotiations with China over the past 2 weeks. While the talks have made some progress, these people said the two sides had not yet agreed to the extent to which the United States will remove existing tariffs on Chinese goods and on specific commitments by China to increase purchases of U.S. agricultural products and or buy more $500,000 shares in Kushner Buildings in exchange for green cards. We could also throw that one in there by way of discussing whether or not he has personal benefits. And essentially, anyone else with his connections to China would be conflicted out of this job, but it doesn't matter because he's probably not going to do this job either. Maybe. Anyway, a White House official confirmed Kushner's involvement but declined to provide specific details on the influence he'd had on negotiations because he hadn't had any. Speaking on condition of anonymity because he's a chicken, the official said Kushner had recently met with Kui Tiankai. I'm guessing at the pronunciation of that anglicized name, the Chinese ambassador to the United States. I should probably know that guy's name, or whether it's a guy or not. That would probably be helpful too. The two have met multiple times since Trump took office, establishing a kind of back-channel relationship, trade experts say. That's not a good idea. You shouldn't have included that one. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin have been leading negotiations with Chinese Vice Premier Liu He for the past 2 years over a range of U.S. complaints about China's trade and subsidy practices, including the forced transfer of American technology to Chinese firms. That is a bit troubling. But I guess Mnuchin and Lighthizer haven't gotten it done, so Jared to the rescue, according to Reuters report carried by CNBC. We got one more thing I definitely want to get to, but only from a weird and different angle. David Farenthold is at it again and hard at work on a vast and very important story, along with Joshua Partlow. He's been working on this one for quite a while, and we've known a part of this story for a long time. New developments in it, though, and it's, by all accounts, a great article. I haven't been able to read all the way through it yet. How two housekeepers took on the president and revealed that his company employed undocumented immigrants. Yes, well, we've known that for a long time. We guessed it for a long time before that. There was already an extensive report in New York Times, dude. I'm sure that both New York Times and Washington Post covered it. It may have been the Times initially. I can't remember who did the report about how many undocumented immigrants were working at the various Trump properties. In particular, the New Jersey golf course was the focus for a lot of the reporting early on. And here's more about it and how they came to, make the decision to call the president out, even at the cost of their jobs. It was a pretty brave thing to do. In fact, every time we read about people who are speaking to reporters on condition of anonymity, that's because they don't want to risk their job in giving out this information, whereas these undocumented workers said not only would they put their jobs at stake, but even their immigration status, their ability to remain inside the United States would be put at risk to make this point. So an incredible story, I'm sure, as it unravels, no matter how it's told. Now, the thing I have just a few minutes to focus on, I was called out originally in my timeline by Garance Frank Ruta, pointing out, also, she says, buried in the piece, although as I skim it, I see that it's not that buried. It's kind of up at the top, but it's not the focus of the piece. But buried, as she says in the piece, the Post appears to have unraveled one of the enduring mysteries of the Trump era, why he is so orange. Haha, we would want to know about this one. That's what I'll spend my time on. She grabbed this clip, this screenshot from the article. And again, let's see. It's like 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I guess they start to get to, oh, maybe not. Maybe it is a little bit further down. I might have mistaken exactly where it appears in the article. But let me just get to the actual thing here, right? Garance grabs Trump. This is the clip from the article. Trump loved Tic Tacs. Now, we know that he loved Tic Tacs. That was what he liked to pop in his mouth when he was going to force an unwanted kiss on somebody. Remember that? But not an arbitrary amount. That is, not an arbitrary amount of Tic Tacs. It's not not that they're saying the love was arbitrary in its amount. Trump loved Tic Tacs, but not an arbitrary amount. He wanted, in his bedroom bureau at all times, 2 full containers of white Tic Tacs and 1 container that was half full. I'd love to know the logic behind that. The same rule applied to this is the big stuff, Bronx Colors brand face makeup from Switzerland that Trump slathered on. 2 full containers, 1 half full, even if it meant the housekeepers had to regularly bring new shirts from the pro shop because of the rust-colored stains on the collar. I mean, hilarious and gross at the same time, right? Why is he so orange? So now that answers the question. Is it a tanning bed or is it face paint? That does actually answer a serious question, although it raises more questions. Like, for me, why is it that he can't get any of this stuff around his eyes? Now, I know you wouldn't want to necessarily put it on your eyelids because, it would get in your eyes when you blink and you'd probably want something different. But there's other makeup that you can use to kind of cover up that transition area there. But he stops well short of it. It made me think that he was on a tanning bed with goggles over his eyes, and that's why he had those weird pink puffy circles around his eyes and couldn't manage to get those to be a uniform orange. But as it turns out, it's just, I don't know, maybe his fingers are too short to reach his eyes. I got no idea how he could not get that stuff closer to his eyes and to really, but he didn't learn any real makeup techniques. By the way, it is straight up makeup. For Mr. Alpha Male, I think you'd think that would be a little bit weird and embarrassing, but maybe he's just really comfortable with his sexuality and we don't have to worry about it, right? But it's the bottle. I saw Josh Marshall went and looked it up online and put pictures of the actual bottles. It's not often that you're going to run into makeup that actually puts the female symbol, the symbol I'm talking about, right, in the logo of the makeup. So, there's you can't even argue that, strong enough for a man, but made for a woman is not really going to fly necessarily. Anyway, why can't he blend? I don't know. I thought the other interesting news was, of course, Trump doesn't buy his own clothing for his golf outings. He just steals them from the pro shop. I guess, again, this is something he believes he owns, and because his company is privately held, nobody makes a big deal out of it, but that's where he gets his clothes. He just has the housekeepers steal them off the rack from the pro shop and bring them in and replace them as quickly as he wears them, because he puts on so much of this stuff, he stains his shirts and they can't get the stain out. The other bit of this little clip here is a special washing machine in the laundry room was reserved for his wife Melania's clothing. I guess she probably had to request that. Get me my own washing machine, because it was happening so frequently that his orange face paint was washing off of his golf shirts and onto her clothes and ruining them. And I guess she can't just steal more off of the rack at the pro shop because she's wearing actual clothing from another store that they might even pay for. I don't know. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting grab from all that. I'd love to know why 2.5 containers of Tic Tacs. I want people to know I'm using the Tic Tacs, right? I don't want to see 3 full Tic Tacs means that anybody I bring back there says he has Tic Tacs, but he's not using them. I don't want to kiss the guy. He smells like an ashtray or whatever. But a half full container suggests that my breath is already at least somewhat fresh. I wonder what the logic is. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We're going to continue on here. We'll hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam to bring you stories that actually do matter, although always with a touch of humor and insight. On the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Let's see. Starting off in his Bistro Cafe. We might as well start now. Giuliani was back in Ukraine, as I told you, plotting as the House held impeachment hearings on the Ukraine plot, almost like Moscow Mitch had predetermined to acquit Trump in the Senate. More here. A Texas judge ordered a group of Trump bros to stop trying to build Trump's border wall near the butterfly sanctuary. How's that working out? Marco Rubio blocked Trump's interior nominee over offshore drilling. I think I missed that one. And much more.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's another bit here. Trump shock trooper Matt Gaetz yelled at Professor Carlin that what does she know? He's going to impeach Obama instead. Oh, yeah, we should have discussed that one a little bit, because there's a kernel of truth in there, too. Plus, take a look at another Trump lawyer, Jay Sekulow, and what he's up to next.